Hi everybody and welcome to Heel Heat. My name is George Coles, and on this episode we're walking in Memphis. Now the topic for this Walking in Memphis is going to be a little bit different than what we normally do. I'm not going to review a specific show. There is one match I am going to review. I did find a video of one match. We'll save that to the very end of this. And if you want to watch that specific match, it will be here in the description. Be advised the video quality is not great. It is from 1979. That being said, what we're going to do here is a tribute to Jerry Jarrett. If you're not familiar with Jerry Jarrett was a successful promoter, wrestler, basically one of the masterminds behind Memphis Wrestling. I'm going to give a brief summary of his career. I'm not going to go into great detail because basically it covers over 50 years in the business with so many iconic moments, so many contributions. The professional wrestling world that you know today would not be where it is without the contributions of Jerry Jarrett. And with that, let's start down our path of what would be the Cliff Notes version of a timeline of his career in professional wrestling. So Jerry Jarrett got into the world of wrestling with his mom, Christine Jarrett, who was working for Herb Welch and Nick Goulas. By the time Jerry was 14 years old, he had gotten into ticket taking, promotions, setting up the ring, and even promoting and booking the matches, which was kind of crazy to think of a 14-year-old that involved in the product in a time, we're talking about the late 50s here, where the wrestling world was very closed off and didn't open itself up like it would in the 80s and 90s. This was still a business of you weren't clued into it unless you knew someone or you were involved. There were a lot of times that family members, wives, children did not know that wrestling was kayfabe, as we should say. So for someone that young to get involved, they had to see something in him, and I believe it was Nick Goulas who initially saw that in him. From that, we get into the early 60s, where he starts refereeing and kind of getting a feel for what it is to be in the ring. A lot of the wrestlers had complaints that you don't know what it is to be a booker if you haven't at least done some refereeing and got in the ring and seen what that was like. From there, in 1965, he makes his wrestling debut. And what has to be one of the great strokes of genius of the time frame, he teases that he's being trained to become a wrestler. Behind the scenes, he's actually being trained by Sailor Moran and Tojo Yamamoto. Tojo Yamamoto is a heel at this point. In front of the scenes, it's announced that Tojo was the guy that was actually training young Jerry Jarrett. And at that point, it turned Tojo Yamamoto face. And for several years, Jerry Jarrett and Tojo would team together, winning several tag team championships. And then Jerry would go off on his own, become a successful wrestler, and still while booking, all at the same time. It was not uncommon in the territory days for the booker to be one of the main wrestlers on the card. We see it everywhere, whether it be Eddie Graham in Florida, the Welch family, they all did it. The Fullers, Ron and Rob Fuller both did it. Vern Gagne did it. Gene LaBelle out in California. So it was kind of a normal thing for one of your big stars to also be the guy writing the show. In 1977, Jerry Jarrett decides he's going to break off from Nick Goulas with the backing of Herb Welch. He creates the CWA, the Continental Wrestling Association, which if you watch my normal Walking in Memphis shows, we base a lot of our videos off of both CWA and later USWA, which is basically the same company. We're about to cover that here in a minute. He starts bringing in what a lot of people would consider the classic age of Memphis wrestling. Guys like Bill Dundee, Austin Idol, Jerry Lawler, the Lawler and Andy Kaufman feud. Guys like Tommy Rich, Eddie Gilbert, Dutch Mantell. Just some great historical stuff. When you think of the Memphis wrestling and the history of Memphis wrestling, a lot of it goes back to this time period and Jerry Jarrett's vision of what Memphis wrestling could be. That goes on through the 80s. In 1988, the writing's on the wall that Vince McMahon is basically in full takeover mode. We're 1 year away from WrestleMania 3, which at that point was a mega show that really changed everything. So the promoters were scrambling to see what they could do to compete. Jim Crockett started expanding. Other companies looked to team together. Initially, Jarrett goes to Vern Gagne and tries to work out a deal with the AWA. They do get somewhat of a deal. If you watch the Supercard show, all three companies are involved. AWA backs out, which leaves World Class Championship Wrestling and CWA to join forces and basically become USWA. That was short-lived as the World Class side kind of fizzled out rather quickly, leaving USWA to just being a Memphis territory. This would go on for several years. In 1992, he starts working with the WWF, which would later go on to be WWE. Initially, it's talked of as he may be Vince McMahon's replacement if Vince McMahon has to go to jail for the steroid trial. There's a talent exchange. Guys from WWE, WWF would come down to Memphis. They would pull wrestlers from Memphis. Jerry Lawler would start commentating around this time, who was the biggest star in Memphis. In 1995, he sells off his part of the company to Jerry Lawler and another backer. And then from there, till about 2002, he basically acts as a consultant for both WCW and WWE, which is kind of impressive if you really think about it, because this was a guy that consulted with a lot of companies, and I didn't mention most of them here. Bill Watts would call him for ideas. Eddie Graham would call him for ideas. As you can see, Vince McMahon tapped into him for ideas. This is a guy that had a knowledge and an understanding of the wrestling business that few others have. After his consulting era goes away, obviously WCW goes by the wayside. He tried to purchase WCW, unfortunately did not get to purchase it, mostly predicated by the fact that they didn't have a TV show. In 2002, he works with his son, Jeff Jarrett. They basically create TNA Wrestling, which very shortly he sells it to Panda Energy, which is Dixie Carter's company, or actually her father's company, but Dixie was the de facto leader of TNA. He stays on with TNA till about 2005, where there's a falling out between him and his son and also the company. This is pretty much where his involvement in pro wrestling ends. He'd come back for DVDs and video commentary, and even last year during Ric Flair's last match show, you seen him with Jeff Jarrett in the build-up and even at the night of the show. From wrestling, he would go on to be successful in real estate market, and I believe he had a construction company as well at one point. Just an amazing talent, an amazing mind for the business. With that being said, I wanted to look up and find something that tied back to Jerry. So I found a match, and the best I could tell, I know it's from 1979. The best I could tell is from December 30th of 1979. It doesn't say it on the video, but from looking and doing a little bit of research on it, that seems to be where it was. This is Jerry Jarrett going up against Jerry the King Lawler, who were both business partners in Memphis Wrestling and also had a fantastic feud at this time frame. One of the earlier Walking in Memphis shows I've done, this feud is mentioned in there. I remember talking about it, and this is just great here. This is the one wrestling match I am going to review here. It's about, I think, 12 minutes, so definitely check it out. It's worth checking out. This is just a masterclass in ring psychology. This match could be happening on Monday Night Raw, Dynamite on Wednesday, and no one would even blink an eye. Now, you're not going to see Hunan Karanas or belly-to-back suplexes or tope suicidas. What you're going to see is a brawl that looks like a real fight between two men with animosity towards each other. Lawler is a heel here. He's being managed by Jimmy Hart. Ken Lucas is out with Jerry Jarrett in the beginning. Hart put something in Ken Lucas's eyes. It looked to me to be a fireball, but I can't say that for sure because the video is kind of grainy. It's a bad video. I mean, it's from 1979, basically almost 45 years ago. This is a good brawling match. It's not what you would think of like wrestling, catch-as-catch-can wrestling, or modern wrestling. There's a lot of work with Lawler hiding a weapon that he's using during the match. Just great ring psychology. Jerry Jarrett playing a perfect baby face. The win comes at the end where Lawler hits two pile drivers, a banned move behind the referee. gets a pin on him. Afterwards, Lawler and Jimmy Hart are attacking Jerry Jarrett, which brings out Bill Dundee to make the save, probably starting one of the 999,942 feuds that they had with each other. This was just, again, I can't say enough on how great this was and how great the psychology of this is. Even without knowing about that feud, Lance Russell cues us in as to why this is an important match and why these guys are going for it as much as they are. For that match, I do rate everything here on a 1 to 5 scale. I'm giving that a 5. With that being said, I had to deviate a little bit off of the norm for this, for someone that meant so much to Memphis Wrestling. And these Walking in Memphis shows, for me, have been a really fun time capsule to go back and watch. I wouldn't feel right not doing some kind of tribute for Jerry Jarrett, considering my channel is now making money off of what he did and how important he is to the professional wrestling world in large, not just me, all over the place. I wouldn't feel right if I didn't do some kind of tribute to him. So with that being said, if you made it all the way to the end, normally this is where I ask you all the normal YouTube stuff. I'm going to skip that. I do want you to do me one favor. If you made it here, put down here in the comments, "Rest in peace, Jerry Jarrett." Absolute legend in the wrestling business. I could go on for hours and hours, and I could have easily made a video of each part of this and explained how important each little piece was. This was the Cliff Notes version. I definitely recommend reading up on Jerry Jarrett if you're not familiar with who he is and seeing just how important he is. With all that being said, my name is George Coles, and we've been walking in Memphis.